Welcome to Data Security Over Coffee. That's DSOC to those in the know.
Where the only thing more dangerous than a zero-day exploit is Chad from accounting clicking on every single email attachment.
From password post-its hidden under keyboards
to that one guy who keeps using password 123 despite our 47 security memos. We're here to talk about the threats you never knew you should be terrified of.
I'm Dr. Joe Harford.
And I'm Angie. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Singer Keating.
Bringing you the latest in cybersecurity nightmares and risk management drama.
Because somewhere out there, a hacker's trying to get into your company's data.
And Karen from HR just clicked on another free iPhone pop-up. This is Data Security Over Coffee, DSOC, where every episode is a penetration test you didn't ask for. So one of the best parts of this is when everybody goes into the make-believe green room, and I get to watch your face, Kevin, because everyone does the same thing with that intro. When they hear the one-liners, they literally crack up. And it's so true, right? I mean, that's I think the funny part is unfortunately also the reality, but being able to see your face was great. So Kevin Shivers is our guest today. I don't know, I'm going to test Kevin's memory. So we met through an organization called the PFEW Experience, Pennsylvania Free Enterprise Week. And that was now 16 years ago is when we met for the very first time. Kevin and I were both company advisors. And not long after that, he reeled me in to become a member of the National Federation of Independent Businesses, because he's always thinking. That's where he was working at the time. Now he's at PACB, and he'll tell you about that. But one of the things I will say, and this will probably weird him out a little bit, one of the funniest, thoughtful, and most considerate CAs that I had the experience of learning from, because not only does he understand business, but he realizes the importance there is to be able to give back to young people in Pennsylvania. And I admire that about Kevin a lot. And our friendship over the last 16 years has grown. It's been a lot of fun. So, and I happen to drag my little sister along because now, if she's smart enough, she's going to show you her hand. Angie Singer Keating is married for 3 whole weeks. Holy schmolies. And this has to happen because I have no way out. She has to stay married because I can't go back to her being single. That's just, it would be a bad thing. I really want her to stay married. I love her husband. I joked at the wedding that I get him in the divorce. So those are the things that are really important. But anyway, I digress as I normally do. So Kevin, who are you? Who is PACB? And what the heck are you doing here?
Well, I hero worship Joe Harford and I hero worship Angie Singer Keating. So I have the greatest job in the world because I represent men and women who are at the tip of the spear of the American economy, community banks. And some people ask, well, what is a community bank? Well, they are local organizations, local institutions in your community, and they take your deposits. You might have a Christmas club. Some people still do. Your checking account, your savings account, and they take those deposits from local community residents, and then they invest those in the community by providing loans. Well, who do they lend money to? Well, they lend money to husbands and wives who want to buy a house, or young people that are looking to start a small business, or someone in the local community who's running a nonprofit who needs financial support. And so that's what a community bank does. They take local deposits, they turn around and they invest those in the local community. Well, where are these community banks? Well, I like to use this analogy. Last year, I was returning to Pennsylvania from remarks I was giving out in Illinois. And I was flying at night. And I don't know if anybody watching your podcast has ever had the privilege of flying over the United States on a beautifully clear, dark evening.
Oh
And
yeah,
when
sure.
you're flying overhead and you see, the lights in Illinois and Chicago, and then you up the river, up the lake, you see the lights of Cleveland, and just south of that you see the illuminated city of Pittsburgh, and it's beautiful. And then you see Altoona, and then you see State College, and then you see Harrisburg, where I live. And the big banks operate in those illuminated communities, and the people that I represent, they represent all of those communities that aren't illuminated in the dark areas at night, rural communities that are the vast majority of communities across Pennsylvania. That's where you're going to see a community bank. What's fascinating about our industry, Joe, is that many of these banks got their start 150 years ago serving customers who otherwise were not banks. They were immigrant populations that were overlooked by the majority populations in those communities back in the
Sure.
day. And
Mhm.
so you have the Slovakian savings and loan, or the Slovenian savings and loan, or even today in Philadelphia, Asian Bank. Like, there are populations of people who are they live and they work and they worship in communities of like-minded people. And
Mhm.
so 150 years ago, some of these folks decided to get together and start a bank so that they could lend money to people to purchase homes in those rural communities, or to be able to start a business. And it could have been a horse, that could have been a horseshoe place. I forget what they call those, right? Or it could have been like a local bakery, or it could have been a barber shop or a laundry. And those small businesses got their start because of these community banks. And when you look at the significance of community banks to our economy, over 70% of small business loans are funded through a community bank. When you take a look at the number of agricultural loans that are lent out to farmers and other agribusiness people, like 80% of those agribusiness loans are lent through a community bank. Tragically, we've seen, because of overregulation, the number of those community banks across this country have gone down dramatically. There are, just in the last 10 years, I think we've lost like 3,000, 4,000 community banks across the country.
Wow.
And there are reasons for that, right? We were, during a couple of, the last federal administrations, there has been a focus on the too big to fail, right? And if we can do things to help those too big to fail institutions, well, that will prop up the economy. Well, when you make those kinds of decisions to support the really biggie banks, as a result, you're going to see pressures on those small community banks, and the regulation that followed really made it hard for those smaller banks to compete. Today, it costs about $25 million to charter a new bank, a new
Wow.
community bank in America. And think about that. $25 million, as as small business people, that's quite a bit of coin.
Yeah.
And tragically, it's a lot easier to make money in a whole lot of other industries today, rather than starting out a community bank. And so,
Well, and Kevin, if I could just interject, I think that just like we small business bear the brunt of regulation that is the result of bad actors, it's the same with the community banks. We saw what happened with Silicon Valley Bank. And so when you look at those types of situations, you go, well, yeah, we need more regulation. Unfortunately, the unintended consequence is that the folks that the PA community bankers, for instance, they're trying to do everything right, and then they get they get slammed with that. And it's not just they're members of the community in how they in the services they offer professionally. You know, when I go to my board meeting for family services here in Blair County, where we help domestic violence victims and we help people with intellectual disabilities, and we have a family shelter, I know I'm going to see Corey Tubo from Reliance Bank because he's our former president and he's a fellow board member. When I make it to the Sunrise Rotary in Altoona, I know I'm going to see Phil Freeman from Reliance Bank. And I see him then when, you know, we do things like food drives and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So they're not just out there professionally helping, they're actually helping all of their members in their community, sometimes some of the most disadvantaged people at the worst times in their lives. And so I'm just, you know, I'm super proud not only to work with PA community bankers, but all these, you know, organizations within our community where I know I'm going to show up and I'm going to see them.
Well, I think one of the
go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
No, so one of the things that it's been almost 4 years ago when Kevin and I met over lunch, and he was, you know, having a conversation about, you know, becoming a member of PACB, and we became a member, an associate member first, and it was very clear that the membership is different in how they approach things. And what I mean by that is being invited to board meetings was very welcoming. Being able to go to networking events was very welcoming. Being able to ask for help of the association was really easy and straightforward. And not just because Kevin and I are friends, but the nature of the staff of PACB is very welcoming. And it's very rare, by the way, it's very rare that someone can keep me from having a lot to say. But in our very first year as an associate member, I was asked to come down and present an award to another vendor partner. And I said, of course I'll come down. Yeah, dressed up, and I get down, I had dinner. Well, I'm standing in the back of the room, and there was an announcement that I'm going to forget the year, I think it was 2023. The 2023 Associate Member of the Year is Reclamere. And I looked at Kevin and I looked at Rich Carr. I'm like, you guys have got to be kidding me. It is rare that people can cause me to be speechless. But the point was, even in that room of all of those people, it was, you were with neighbors. I mean, Reliance Bank that Angie had mentioned has been a longtime client of ours. They have a branch right across the street from Reclamere in Tyrone, Pennsylvania. And so that, I think that community atmosphere is what attracted us to membership. And now it's gone to a point where we feel very serious about being able to work with all of that leadership group to say, listen, we've got to talk about the challenges that are outside of what you normally are used to. And really, what does cyber look like? And how are you going to address it? Because we know that the landscape is changing. Everybody wants to talk about artificial intelligence and what are we going to do about third-party vendor risk. But the reality is that, you know, you have small community banks, they don't have huge IT resources. And so if we have the ability to come in and just have the conversation, you don't even have to buy anything from us, but just have the conversation, that's for us, that's been incredibly welcoming and helpful, and we appreciate it.
Well, and don't forget, Joe, you know, one of a philosophy that I have in how I represent my organizations is to partner with people who can help our members be better, right? Isn't that what every small business wants, is a partner who can help them be bigger or feel bigger and allow them to compete at a little better part of the playing field, which is going to help the bottom line. And having a history with Reclamere, and again, it started for us. I saw your passion as we talked about, you know, volunteering at business camp, but I knew how committed you were to helping others. And I saw the work that you do. We had those conversations about what you do. And so it just seemed like a natural partnership as community banks are dealing with so many threats right now. And they've evolved right from the, you know, the robbery note on the bottom of a deposit slip that's slipped to the teller window, right? You know, now these robberies are occurring electronically. And not only are they occurring where there are incursions into the bank, but there are now incursions into their customers' email. And then you have these scams where poor senior citizens are, being convinced to go take their own money and to drop that into a crypto ATM. So the battle on electronic crime or fraud and cyber, it's coming from so many different places.
Mhm.
And through our partnership for all of those years, and Angie, I've known you almost as long, and I knew this was a partnership that could create value for community banks. And we're thrilled because you leaned in as well. And you recognize within our industry as community banks, business is done with a handshake. They want, a community banker is not going to respond to you, chances are, from an email solicitation.
Right.
You're not going to, they're not going to take you up on an offer just because your name is on the associate membership marquee. They want to get to know who you are, and particularly because community banks don't have the resources to make a lot of one-offs. They can't take flyers on technology, especially. They need to, they need to learn and understand the value proposition and the solution and how you can deliver. But you need to do that through talking to people, learning from them, breaking bread. Culture is really important in a community bank, and that culture matters. And so you leaned in as Reclamere, and you got involved, and we invited you out to talk with our members about topics. And what I really remember most of all is you weren't there to sell a Ginsu knife, right? You were there to actually work with our members, and you were talking about high level risk management topics that they needed to be mindful of in the current threat environment. And you went through them one by one, and at no time in your presentation were you making a sales presentation and trying to sell a product or a service. All you were doing was looking to impart some knowledge and wisdom to help that CEO be better. And they took that information back, and we watched that organic growth. And it took a little bit of time, right?
Sure.
Those presentations, but all of a sudden you had community banks who responded. And tell us a little bit about your success, because this industry, you have helped countless community banks across Pennsylvania, I'm sure in the mid-state region, to be able to grow too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been very fortunate because one of the things that we know is the solution isn't always about, are you going to buy the latest box or the latest widget or what have you? It really is, and she gets uncomfortable when I say this, but Angie has spent the vast majority of her career really developing within the triad of governance, risk, and compliance as it pertains to information security and management. And so it's not about, we're going to come in and sell you all brand new computers, or we're going to sell you a brand new router or firewall. No, it's about literally sitting down and saying, okay, what are you doing about your policy and practice development? What are you doing when it comes down to third-party vendor risk? What are you doing about understanding your overall cybersecurity posture? Because at the end of the day, people say things like, well, I have cyber insurance. Well, you may have cyber insurance today, but that doesn't mean you're going to get it renewed. Also, just because you have cyber insurance doesn't mean that they're going to pay your claim. So now we've got to be able to have a much deeper conversation around not only technology, but more importantly, what are those elements that create risk so we can create guide rails to manage it better, and to accept the fact that community banks do rely on so many outside third parties, some of which they can't make go away. I was fortunate enough yesterday, I was invited by one of the members to go and to present to their board of directors. And what was supposed to be a 15-minute conversation turned into almost an hour. It was a lot of fun. But board members were focused on two things. They were focused on ransomware, and they were focused on artificial intelligence. What does it mean to this small bank? And so fortunately, this particular bank has really engaged a number of different partners to talk about technology, process, people, et cetera, and that they understand that they're never going to just simply check a box and be happy. they're going to literally sit down with somebody like Angie and walk through, what does the roadmap look like? Where are we going over the next 12 and 24 months? And making that part of their overall information technology budget. So it's not just, well, we're going to do some one-off, and we're going to do a little bit of training, we're going to check a box. That's not it at all. And so now it really becomes, for us, having a very strategic, business-driven conversation. Angie and I, in a couple of weeks, are going to be traveling up to Erie to be with one of your very good friends up in Erie, Pennsylvania. And, you know, she has been adamant about wanting to sit down and have a strategic conversation about third-party vendor risk management. Well, we're going to do that because what we know is those vendors are presenting risk. You know, Angie is responsible for training our team to be able to manage those relationships. And, you know, when you talk about a board member yesterday who's a CPA firm who doesn't realize that just because he's in the cloud doesn't necessarily mean that he's safe. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is a much deeper conversation than just simply selecting a vendor. And so I'm grateful, because that's the work that's not my forte, and that's the world that Angie lives in, because it's about being able to communicate it in a business impact way, to understand it. It's not about, oh my gosh, a breach is going to cost you $10 million. Now let's talk about, what does it mean to your business? What's the impact on downtime, et cetera? And I think that's the value that, you know, Reclamere brings to the table as a preferred partner when we start talking about that strategic conversation.
Well, and one of the really interesting things that happened last year was the FFIEC sunsetting their cybersecurity assessment tool. And so, you know, so many folks were used to using that in, you know, preparation for audits and in making sure that they were going to be compliant. And I think it was a good thing that FFIEC made the decision to sunset their own tool and migrate over to the NIST cybersecurity framework, which is the National Institutes for Standards and Technology. And so we've been working in that framework for 25 years. And it's a natural mapping for us because things like our healthcare clients with the HIPAA security rule, they map straight to NIST CSF. And so being able to speak to your members as they were calling us saying, hey, this thing's being sunsetted and we need help. We're like, hey, we have your back. We've been in this world for a really, really long time. And we're here to help you with that migration. Those are just some of the things that not only around third-party risk, but helping them on that GRC journey to transition and making them comfortable with that change. Because obviously banking, insurance, very risk averse industries, and change is scary. So I hope that, you know, we've been able and we continue to help them make that change a little less scary.
That is an important point, Angie, because you know, I think with AI, new technology, new opportunities, and you know, for banks, if you think about it, banks for decades have been using large data sets to manage risk, identify customers, and improve operations. So the idea of AI really shouldn't concern a bank CEO. It's just a new technology to leverage, but it's how it's presented, right? Yes. And I've watched presenters who go into a room and their whole presentation is about scaring the CEO yes. or the senior leadership or the board into going back to their operational people and saying, we're not doing it. Turn off that computer, pull that link out of the wall. We are not getting involved in this technology. And that's not the right approach. The right approach is to demonstrate that with the proper risk management profile, you can leverage this tool to be able to build your bottom line and build your business model. And that, I think, is what's important when you guys take a look at overall that risk management profile in the vendor management space, just to be able to raise the level of understanding for those bank leaders to be able to make good decisions.
Mhm.
The challenge that I've heard anecdotally, the worst, the worst breaches and ransomware and cyber attacks on financial institutions, ironically, maybe not for your industry, but it comes through those third-party security providers, right?
Mhm.
And so there is some type of hole in the security infrastructure that's being exploited, and now going into the financial institution, and that can be through, you pick it, any vendor using technology, right, is now
Mhm.
putting the institution at risk. And so
Yeah.
for large
Yeah.
banks, they have whole departments that are managing this, right? They have
Yes.
dozens of people who are analyzing that technology every day. Community
Mhm.
banks, when you're talking 50 to 70 employees, chances are, and I'm sure that risk department is probably, you could probably name them all on one hand.
Mhm.
Probably many of them are fewer. So the fact that you're able to offer that resource is really valuable to help them to make real strategic decisions about the partners they have, and how their risk profile stacks up.
Well, I'm glad you brought up that issue around risk with vendors, technology providers, because Reclamere is a managed security services provider. We don't log in and change firewall rules, or we don't log in and patch your systems. That's something that an MSP, which is a managed service provider, does, and they do that incredibly well. What Reclamere does is provide the third party assurance that the services that your managed service provider is providing to you, are secure. We test that and make sure, and that you're getting the services that your contract says you should have. And if you're not, we want to let you know that, so that you can get your service provider to up their game, or you can find another provider. And so it's super important that not only if you have a service provider that's logging in to maintain your systems, but if you have a service provider that's going to connect to your email with maybe an AI tool that's going to help you be more efficient in email. People don't realize the fact that Grammarly is an AI tool. And so, you want to make sure you're using the proper paid version that has the security controls in place. Because you're right, it is about risk management, especially for small organizations. AI can be a force multiplier that can really do some incredible things and allow you to do more with the same group of people, and allow your people to do the things that are really important, like taking care of your clients face to face in an authentic way. But you also have to make sure that when they're connecting and hooking into those systems with any type of AI tool, that it's being done in a secure way. And it really comes down to trust and verify, that you're getting the security that you think you are getting. And that's really the value add that Reclamere provides when we're helping clients understand that risk, or look at their critical vendors. I would most definitely consider technology service providers to be critical vendors. So, let's do a review. Let's look at how they're securing things, because you don't want to find out when you're down and not able to function because of a ransomware attack, or you've got all of your customers' information out there, or you've got money coming out being siphoned out of accounts.
Kevin,
How do you guys have the hard conversation with your client that one of their vendors or providers may not be using best practices and could be putting the institution at risk? Because I would imagine, particularly for a lot of community banks, some of these providers, these partners, have been there for decades, right?
Mhm.
And they and they've always been trusted, and they deliver great service. But as you point out, I mean, this technology evolution, not everybody is at the same place in the journey. How do you have that conversation so you don't create, because I would imagine there is a potential for creating a lot of distrust potentially, and it becomes really disruptive. But how do you turn that into a constructive conversation?
Well, Joe is really, really good with actually partnering with technology service providers that work with banks. And so they're actually asking us to come in and look at their clients' environment and give them feedback. Because here's the reality, Kevin. Oftentimes, when we find a service provider is not providing something critical in the cybersecurity realm, it's not because it hasn't been offered. It's because it's been offered to the client, in this case, the bank, and the bank made a financial decision not to invest in something because they think maybe they're being you just want to sell me more things, Mr. Technology Provider. You're just trying to get me to spend more money, or we don't really think we need that. And so oftentimes that technology provider is happy to have us come in and tell the client, no, they're not just trying to make more money off of you. They're trying to increase your security. So that's one conversation. And those MSPs welcome us giving that information to the client. On the other hand, when we do go in and we see, one of the worst offenders are website developers, and they don't secure the websites. And it's kind of an afterthought. And we go in and we say, listen, this is a challenge. Well, then it's time to meet the client where they are. And maybe they're getting ready to do a whole new website in a couple months or in the coming year. We say, okay, let's make sure in your contract for your new website, we're going to build in the contract something called OWASP standards, which is the Web Application Security Protocol. And your new web developer is going to have to contractually comply and keep your website secure. And here's how they'll do it. And so we try to help them then in the process of either helping their current service provider come up to speed and get where they need to be, or helping that bank say, maybe it's time we reevaluate and we look at some other vendors. So in those cases, we can help them craft new RFPs to look at service providers. And if the current service provider, if the incumbent wants to stay there, they're going to have to step up their game in their proposal for how they're going to do that for the client. So it's often not uncomfortable because we're coming at it from one of those two different ways.
I think what you have to do, Kevin, is, and I'll use our friend up in Erie as an example. It's about asking them, what do they want to accomplish? So there are typically 2 or 3 business elements that they want to accomplish. And then we ask them how technology is going to impact that. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't. And then we talk about what's their risk tolerance, what's their risk appetite. And then we talk about how many third-party vendors do you work with? And then we ask them, how secure do you believe they are? And every time they will say, we have no idea. Okay, so let's take a look at some publicly available information. And it's not meant to be damning. It's not meant to be disparaging. It's meant to create awareness for a senior level executive to make a decision. It's no different. It's no different than health. You want to get healthy. You want to run a marathon. You want to lose weight or whatever. We have to get a baseline in order to do that. Cyber maturity requires a baseline. And so it's also one of those things where when you're having that conversation and so someone will see that perhaps one of their most trusted third-party vendors, also their friends for the last 30 years, they don't look so good. Our position is, let me ask you a question, Angie. Don't you want to help them get better? Well, of course I do, Joe. So basically there's a relationship there. We're trying to help them understand what does the risk profile look like, and then how invested is that executive banker in helping that vendor get better. More times than not, they're going to say, we're very invested. Okay, then let's have a productive conversation. Not, oh my gosh, give them 90 days to turn it around, or you should discontinue your contract and fire them. Absolutely not. I mean, it could come to that place perhaps, but the reality is, goes back to the very beginning of our conversation, and the nature and culture of the community bank is to say, this particular vendor was here with me when we started the bank, and now we're on the second generation of owners. Okay, let's talk about how to help them. And I think that's the way in which you approach it, so it's not adversarial.
That's fantastic. And I can imagine that type of approach is very comforting, and it's a great conversation to have with bank leadership, to know that this new conversation, when we're talking about risk management in our vendor management, isn't going to result in disruption to their existing supply chain, their existing vendor portfolio.
Mm-hmm. So Kevin, I mean, obviously, between what you do on a daily basis and then the conversations you're involved in and executive briefings, and then obviously the annual conference and the work that you do with your own board, I'm wondering from your perspective if there are things that you hear out in the ether where members are wondering or curious or concerned about in that whole sphere of cyber that kind of piques your interest, or you sit back and go, wow, this is definitely a topic that we have partners that can help with.
Yeah. Go ahead, Angie. I'm sorry.
No. Joe had asked a question. I'm fascinated to hear your answer.
Sure. This currently, again, this issue of cyber security and preparedness is extraordinarily important right now, not only for those internal customers, but again for the external customers. And we're watching. It's frightening to see really good people, good customers, very seasoned in their careers, in retirement, who are walking up to the teller window and trying to withdraw $50,000 of their own money, and they're going to go put it in the crypto ATM because they believe in a scam. Or the horror stories that we're seeing with these man in the middle campaigns, where you have contractual agreements between two parties, a bank customer and a vendor. There was one incident that we're aware of where there was $1 million transaction. There was a nonprofit had a building built or a renovation, and it was $1 million renovation, and the vendor initiated to the bank customer they sent him an invoice and said, hey, pay due upon receipt, and they knew it was coming, and they were pleased with the work, and so they initiated the ACH, and the bank called the customer and said, hey, that's a lot of money. Is this supposed to go to this Yes, they are. Is it supposed to be this amount? Yes, it is. Is this the account? Well, yeah, it's what they sent me. Are you sure? Yes, I am. And so then they send the transaction, and a few days later, the vendor sends them an invoice and says, due upon receipt. And so the bank customer calls the vendor and said, wait a minute, I already paid that. And they said, well, how could you have paid that? We didn't send you the invoice. Yeah, you did. It's right here. That's not our invoice. Right. So, our members are, right in the middle of this battle where, the bad guys are trying all different ways to separate people from their money. So it's not just, penetrating bank security or vendor security. I mean, another area that is really critical is this penetration where, customers of the bank are being used as pawns in, defrauding themselves out of their own money. And there needs to be a huge, education that goes along with customers in that space. Another big challenge right now is this world of stablecoin and digital assets, right? Which is a big one. Our banks have for years, you need to go where your customers are, right? That's something we all know in business. But there is this new direction where, many people who may not have been attached to banks before, or folks who are looking for new ways to do business, whether they're doing international business or others are looking at digital assets. And so my industry is really concerned in making sure that they can maximize the opportunity for themselves as well, making sure that the bank is responsible for making sure that the financial system is clear of the bad guys, right? That there's no money that's changing hands in the bank that is the result of some type of illegal activity, whether it's drugs, whether it's human trafficking, what have you, gambling. So, that's pretty much easy to do when you're talking about dollars and cents and cash and checks and so forth. Well, it's a little bit different animal with the anonymity that goes along with these crypto transactions, these digital transactions. Certainly, the Genius Act has helped tremendously with that, right? Because I think folks who think there somehow is some real anonymity that goes along with digital assets and these digital payment transactions are going to be sadly mistaken. There's not. There's an expectation that there's going to be some regulation to that, right? That's what the Genius Act did. But how do those institutions navigate the new normal, right? Because this potentially could lead to a run on deposits where some customers may choose to take all of their money out of the bank and put it in these digital assets where it's not guaranteed by the full faith and credit of the government, and B, that money isn't in the bank. That's those deposits, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, are being used by those banks to be able to invest in loans and in other investments in the community. So anytime you're taking money out of the bank and you're not deploying it into the community, that is a concern. So our folks are learning how to navigate this new normal, and what does this normal mean? And we're obviously at the table looking intently at how regulations are being drafted. But the point here in the conversation, I think, is the whole conversation has really just transitioned all the way over to this digital space, the cyber space. And what does this world look like? Now, here's where I think there's an advantage for our industry is, the community bank, its advantage over the biggie bank is typically because the CEO's office is literally right behind the teller line, right? They are within walking distance or earshot of the bank customer. And so it's that service that with a handshake, it's that personal interaction and involvement. That when you walk into a community bank, those are your neighbors. Those are your, the parents from, gymnastics or sporting activities. And that's where I think community banks are really well positioned, because they're going to be able to take that type of community service and they're going to turn that into their virtual space, right? So they're going to leverage that, and I think they're going to be able to win in this space for digital assets. I think the community bank that finds a way to go into the high school and to help their students open a digital wallet, those banks are going to be the community banks. And quite honestly, the biggie banks really don't care about those types of customers, right? The biggie national banks are responsible for moving large sums of money. They're the ones that are really moving major sums of money through the economy. They're not going to be well positioned to support regular bank customers in local communities like the ones we have across Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and Kevin, that's one of the things that I think community banks do well also is, educating the community, whether it's going out to senior centers, whether it's going to talk to community events about security, because, folks my age, we're helping to take care of parents that are aging. And, my mom, I remember, went to the bank to withdraw a big sum of money because she was going to be purchasing a car, I believe it was. And, she was so upset because, the teller was asking her all these questions, and it's none of their business what I'm doing with money. And, they're going to report me to the government, and that kind of like almost paranoid. And I said, no, Mom, that's not why they're asking you those questions. They're asking you those questions because, your generation is preyed upon so much. They're trying to protect you to make sure that you're not trying to take that money out and then send it to some scammer somewhere. And so they're just trying to help you. And the big major banks, they don't necessarily have that kind of time or that kind of dedication to these folks that in their community are vulnerable to these types of attacks. And so I think those are some of the really valuable things that community banks are also out there doing.
So of the now, it's down to 115. Sorry, Kevin, you're not holding on to the crowd very well. Here's a question for Angie. They're going to try to stump you, and hopefully they will. So to Angie, and this is, I don't know why people cannot learn how to type. Oh my gosh, here we go. Okay. As a community banker, ooh, this is good. As a community banker, what advice do you have for us as we get ready to consider AI implementation? That's a good one. I like that. Okay, Angie, what you got?
Well, the very first thing is make sure that you are looking at the business use case for that AI. And so that requires the same type of, sitting down, talking with the departments that want to use it. What is the business case? Why do they want to use it? And then mapping out the workflow to look for the vulnerabilities of where the problems can happen. Remember, if there's any type of free technology that you're considering using, like, the Grammarly free version or any of that kind of stuff in your email, you are the product and your data is somehow being monetized. The other thing I think that's super, super important that we need to start talking about are how do we make sure that help desks, when they get the call of needing password changes and doing those password changes, that the person on the other line is legitimate. And so there are some new really great tools that are coming out now where there's two-way authentication, that if Kevin Shivers, calls my help desk and wants a password change, there are ways that we can validate that it is truly Kevin Shivers and not someone impersonating him. So it's really about looking at the workflow and the business use case, and then thinking like the bad guys on where am I going to break this process down and try to insert myself. And those are some of the conversations that we're really good at having. It's also really good to make sure that your incident response plan is up to date for those AI challenges, because something will go wrong at some point. And we want to make sure, especially if this AI is going to touch or be adjacent to any of your mission critical applications or business processes, that we want to sit down and we want to make sure that we're working through how we're going to handle it when something does in fact go wrong and something bad happens. So updating that incident response plan is another reason why you really want to think about the use cases around AI. The other thing is making sure that you're not going out and buying tools that you might already have. So for instance, if you're a Microsoft shop, your company uses Microsoft 365, you may already have a level of subscription that has some really cool security tools built in. You may already have a subscription level on your Microsoft subscription that has some AI tools built in that stay right in your tenant. So those are kind of some of the other things. And Joe, having insulted the person who asked this question about their, insulting them about their typing, I have to, apologize on his behalf. But I also hope that I've answered your question. I'm also guilty of giving out a lot of free consulting that Joe yells at me for. So, if this person wants to have a one-on-one conversation with me, I'm happy to do that as well.
Oh, Angie, keep talking. Keep talking. Just say anything at all. No, just keep saying something. Hi. Look at that, Kevin. I have the power to mute her. Do you see that? She can't do it. I just learned something new. See, you say anything you want about it. I have the console. How fortunate am I? Oh, you know what? I appreciate my little sister.
Well, you can't see it, but I'm sitting on my hands to resist the urge.
See, I did it again. See how that works, Kevin? This is great. This is great. I know she's going out of her mind. Okay, Kevin, what would you like to either final question, final statement, sum it up? We appreciate you being our guest, but anything you want to share with us, or you have questions for us that we can help you with before we wrap up?
I do. Really, I wanted to talk with you about, I know you run a tabletop exercise for community banks, and maybe just can you maybe at a 10,000 foot level, what are you trying to help the bank understand through that tabletop exercise? And as well, maybe walk through, how, what are the processes, procedures, or, what are some of what have you learned through those exercises with banks in terms of what are the common areas where they, where they've hit some rough points or where they're doing it better?
Sure. So the purpose of the incident response plan tabletop exercise is for the bank to literally go through a live scenario. Many of them will focus on ransomware. The other ones will focus on a core system crashing. Others will go over something to do with employee misconduct. And the reason why we want to go through the tabletop exercise is because we can go ahead and we can write and develop any kind of plan we want to. And that looks great in a flow chart or in a 3-ring binder. But until you test it, you don't know if you are missing something or not. And I think that our team, Randy, Gene, and Tim, do a really good job running our customers through those exercises and also making sure that we collect lessons learned, that we modify the incident response plan based upon the results of that scenario. We also encourage people, and this is just simply what we do as a partner, but for us, when we develop an incident response plan, we go through the tabletop exercise, we issue it back to the client. On an annual basis, we will retest their incident response plan at no cost to them, because that's how serious it is as a partner relationship. Where do they get hung up? They typically get hung up in they don't know what they don't know. Who are all the vendors? What's the requirements of the cyber insurance carrier? What are they going to do in the event if somebody's out on vacation? Because this is one of the things that I've done, and it drives Randy crazy. So we'll get everyone around the table. They have their entire incident response plan team is assembled, and there'll be somebody at the table and they're ready to go. And I'll say, can you tell me what your name is? Oh yeah, my name is Bob. Bob, you need to get out of the room. And people are like, what are you talking about? Well, Bob, you're on vacation today. They're like, no, no. Bob's on vacation during this particular scenario. So now what are you going to do? The point is that you are never going to get everybody together in a room and everybody's calm and happy and all that kind of, and prepared, and then not have somebody on vacation, somebody is sick, somebody can't connect in through Zoom or what have you. And so those kind of scenarios are meant to get them to understand contingencies and what do you do in the what if situations and the plan Bs. Once they go through that incident response plan, they start to ask themselves some additional questions, which we've had recently, which is, okay, how does this relate to our business continuity and disaster recovery plan? Well, it has a relationship and they need to be complementary to one another. And many organizations have, if they have a business continuity and disaster recovery plan, it's outdated. That's the other challenge. Then they will turn around and will say, well, how do we even know beyond our incident response plan what our own cyber posture looks like? Well, when was the last time that you had a security risk analysis performed? Some will say, well, it's been kind of like 3 or 4 years, or, we do the self-assessment thing or whatever the case may be. So the incident response plan is a really great exercise to bring everybody to the table and talk about who, what, when, where, why, and how. It then starts another bigger conversation that says, okay, what are we doing long-term to really improve our cyber maturity? And that's, for me at least, that's a lot of fun in the conversation. It really is. Does that help, Kevin?
Absolutely. And that question or the comment that you made about somebody not being in the room because they're on vacation. I mean, I think every one of us has a story about something bad happening in our own organization. And yeah, that never happens when everybody's there. Really important to think about that.
Yeah. The other thing, it's getting better. But we used to have a hard time getting all the parties at the table. When we do a tabletop, we want HR to be there. We want legal to be there. We want the executive to be there. We want the board to be there if possible. Because, one of the things that I like to ask is, you outsource your payroll. Your payroll provider got hit by an attack, not you, but your payroll provider. Now your employees can't get paid. Their direct deposit can't go out. Who here can write physical hard copy paper checks because you have no idea when your payroll provider is coming back up? So who can, and how are we going to do it? And how are we going to handle those part-time employees where their hours vary from week to week so that, we can figure out how do we pay them temporarily while the payroll company comes back up. And so those types of questions are designed to get people at the table who may think that a security incident is only an IT issue, and they're the only ones who need to run through these types of scenarios. So we purposefully make the scenarios touch every single part of the organization so that we can get them. If we can't get them to the table, we can at least get the people at the table asking them questions later that hopefully get them to the table next time and get the discussion and the dialogue going.
What can you tell us? Are there data points you could share, after you run these programs? I mean, and I wish I knew the term of art, but what kind of success rate are you having post event that are helping your customer banks, be better? Are you seeing a number of your clients institute, changes to policy, changes to risk management, changes to their cyber insurance? Are
Yes.
in that regard?
That's why I keep doing this after 25 years. First of all, most of our clients come to us because they've had something happen and somebody referred them to us. Number one, I don't want to jinx us, but once people become clients of ours, the severity, or I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to jinx us. But after they become clients of ours, things go well. And one of the reasons I keep doing this is because when we do a security risk analysis and we develop a remediation roadmap for the client, and I see them quarter after quarter, year after year, their cyber maturity goes up, that is one of the most rewarding things for me. And the other rewarding thing for me is when the IT staff of an organization or the MSP says, I've been trying to get my client, or I've been trying to get my boss to invest in the things that you're recommending, and I've been told no until you did your report and showed them why it's important from the business perspective. That's one of the highest compliments we can get from a client. And that's one of the highest satisfactions I get from clients when I watch that progress and I know they're getting better. I don't want clients that just want to check a box. That has absolutely zero interest to me at this point in my career.
Well, and I know several years ago, you conducted a cyber checkup for my organization, the association as well. And again, the expectation isn't, you're never going to build a wall that's impenetrable, right? But you're providing your customers with a peace of mind to know that they're thinking about these challenges more broadly. And that solution of the no, I don't know what I don't know, that problem becomes a little bit more manageable. But in our instance in particular, working with our MSP, you found some real vulnerabilities for us within our email system as an example. But not only that, it led to regular education and ongoing training with our team in managing those. So look, we're never going to stop the bad guys. They're always going to be trying to penetrate all of our systems. But if we can raise a level of understanding so that I have someone who doesn't automatically click on a link that they receive, right? Or if somebody questions, why did I get an email that says, payroll's been adjusted, and then, like little things like that really do help to raise it reduces the level of anxiety, and it raises a little bit more confidence, because when the bad stuff happens, you now have a plan on the shelf that is a little bit more sophisticated to be able to walk through those challenges. So I have to say, from our perspective, really appreciated learning from you, which helped us, I think, be a little better that way.
Well, you know what? The relationship and the friendship is great. The ecosystem of PACB has been welcoming and a lot of fun to learn from, because we have learned from community bankers, hopefully as much as they have learned from us, which has been great, because I know that that's a big deal for Angie. But believe it or not, this is one of those times I have to wrap up the call because I have to get on a call with a group of community bankers to talk about incident response planning. Look at that. See, I'm doing my job. Angie's going to go back to sleep or take a nap or do something.
Before you cut me off, on December 3rd at noon, I will be doing a webinar for Tricia and the Pennsylvania Community Bankers Association on the importance of security incident and event management, and how, aggregating your logs and storing your logs, and how all of that is a really good thing, and why you need to do it and how you need to do it. So please join us December 3rd. I know Tricia will be getting her marketing out. She's working with Abby, our marketing guru, and our resident honey badger, and she'll be taking care of all of that.
Super.
Tell you what, you guys have the best logo in the business. I'll tell you that much.
Thank you so much. And by the way, happy Thanksgiving.
And to you as well.
See you all later.
Bye, Kevin. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.